Members, Mr Stuart Dixon has given notice of an urgent oral question to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. I would remind members that if they wish to ask a supplementary question, they should rise continually in their places. The member who tabled the question will be called automatically to ask a supplementary. Clerk, please read the question.
To ask the First Minister and Deputy First Minister whether the North-South Ministerial Council meetings will resume immediately following the declaration by the High Court.
And I call the First Minister. First Minister.
Mr Speaker, the judgment in the matter of an application by Sean Napier for judicial review was received by the Department this morning. It is currently being considered.
Supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I ask the First Minister, having had his party placed in the dock yesterday, what action he now proposes to take to ensure that he and the Deputy First Minister, and indeed all ministers, will adhere to the ruling of the court yesterday? And will he also advise and ensure this House that the €1 billion of peace funding that has been pledged by the EU and others will not be placed in jeopardy by any further political antics?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In respect of the issues that have led us to this place, I have been very clear to members that the way to resolve this is through a political resolution. I look forward to what the European Union will publish tomorrow, that engagement with the United Kingdom Government, because it is the result of the protocol and the Members' Party and others in this place demanding its rigorous implementation that has created the tensions that now exist within these institutions. Whenever you trash East-West relationships, you undermine the basis on which the Belfast Agreement was founded. That has knock-on effects whenever it comes to North-South relations. I want to get a political resolution which then will uphold all aspects of the Belfast Agreement and the relevant strands that flow from it.
I call Pashian.
The days of the DUP playing politics with the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement must end today. Justice Schofield was clear and unequivocal yesterday that the actions of DUP ministers are unlawful. Can the First Minister explain here today what other blockages exist to stop DUP ministers attending North-South ministerial meetings?
Well, Mr Speaker, the North-South bodies didn't meet for 3 years because Sinn Féin pulled down these institutions. So we will not take any lectures from the party opposite whenever it comes to how these institutions should be operated in a manner which is faithful. So, Mr Speaker, the way to get a resolution to these issues is for the party opposite and those other parties that campaign for the protocol, that advocate for its rigorous implementation, is to recognise the harm that it causes, the damage that it's inflicted on our East-West relationships, and get a political resolution. In that political resolution, then the institutions of the Belfast Agreement will be able to operate in a way that they are upheld and acted faithfully.
I call Paul Fruit.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The last time the Executive Office was involved in a court case, the judge stated of Sinn Féin that it demonstrates either wilful disregard for the rule of law or abject ignorance of what the rule of law means in a democratic society. That was to do with the victims' payments, and we'll all recall that. Mr First Minister, will you give this House a commitment today that you will fight for Northern Ireland, its people and its businesses with regards to the protocol?
Well, I thank the member for his intervention, and he's right to highlight that there have been times in the past where ministers have been taken to court where they have breached the ministerial code and that has been found against them. The member has alluded to one particular incident. There were other incidences where that did indeed occur. Again, the member is right. What I am committed to is ensuring that the new decade, new approach, and the commitment that was made by the United Kingdom Government that Northern Ireland would have its place fully respected within the internal market of the UK is upheld. They made the pledge, they need to deliver on that pledge, and my party is determined that we see a successful outcome.
Call Colin McGrath.
Mr Speaker, North-South cooperation works for people on this island. It delivers for the people of Northern Ireland. It delivers for the First Minister's constituents. By not attending these bodies, we prevent delivery on this island. Is this not a monumental example of cutting off your nose to spite your face?
Again, Mr Speaker, the member fails to recognise the absolute critical importance of the East-West relationship. And whenever the protocol was imposed upon the people of Northern Ireland, it did not have the consent of a single unionist representative. The Belfast Agreement was based upon a delicate balance that respected both unionists and nationalists. But fundamentally, it also said that any constitutional change would require the consent of the people of Northern Ireland. There was no consent to the change which has been derived as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So the issue around North-South, it is an important issue, but it is a symptom of a much deeper problem which has been infected into our political system through the protocol, which his party and others campaign for and demand the rigorous implementation of.
I call John Stewart.
I thank the First Minister for his response. First Minister, in light of this case and the growing political instability and the back of everything associated with this, would he support calls for the Secretary of State to expedite legislation at Westminster to protect these institutions should they fall and keep ministers in place, given the massive and grave issues that this country are currently facing?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm always the optimist. I always seek to try and get political resolution. And the European Union will publish its proposals tomorrow. We await to see the detail of that. The United Kingdom published in its command paper all of the issues which have flowed as a result of that protocol. They have indicated their timeline for a period of intense negotiations. I very much want to see a successful outcome to that. I am pleased that there is now recognition on the part of the European Union and on the part of the United Kingdom Government that there are severe problems now as a result of the protocol. That wasn't the case until this party took action and made it clear to those within this Assembly and to the United Kingdom Government and to the European Union that change needs to be delivered upon. I hope that we will get a successful outcome, which wouldn't necessitate the requirement to expedite that legislation at Westminster in order to protect these institutions. But that said, that is part of New Decade, New Approach. It is working through I think it's currently in the House of Lords. It will come back into the Commons and should become law at some point later this year.
Landry Muir.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I ask this question to yourself as First Minister, conscious that you hold a joint office with the Deputy First Minister. In yesterday's judgment, the Justice Schofield stated, "It is difficult for the Court to reach any other conclusion than that the DUP have consciously determined to act in contravention of the Pledge of Office and the Ministerial Code." What message does this send to the people of Northern Ireland in the context of the need for everyone in this House and ministers to uphold the rule of law?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Court, in the judgment, part of which I have also been able to read, said that the Court would also be astute to any potential misuse of its process for the purposes of seeking political advantage. From the judgment was made yesterday, all I have heard from the other parties in this place is seeking to take political advantage as a result of that. I want to see a political resolution to the current issues that are facing us. The protocol has inflicted the harm. The criteria by which Article 16 should be triggered has been met. The UK Government have said that now on numerous occasions. Therefore, we need to now see action behind the words of both the UK Government and also when it comes to the European Union by way of what proposals it intends to publish tomorrow.
Jim Allister.
Is there a point of principle here for the First Minister which is more important than holding office?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm sure the member for North Antrim welcomes the action that the Democratic Unionist Party has taken in order to bring these things to a head. He is right to seek to have a resolution. This party is focused on outcomes that resolve the issues. That's what I think everybody wants in this place. We want to have these institutions operating in good faith. That's what I'm about, and I'm about getting an outcome that satisfactorily resolves the issues in terms of what this party has laid out as being the problems.
You call Claire Stogden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the First Minister recognise that the institutions are mutually exclusive as per the principles of the Good Friday Agreement, thereby continuing to sit in the Executive and this Northern Ireland Assembly? It's somewhat undermining what you're currently doing at North-South Ministerial Council.
Well, Mr Speaker, we want to give the United Kingdom Government, the European Union, an opportunity to put right the wrongs that flowed from the withdrawal agreement and the protocol that was signed up to by the UK Government. They have an opportunity to do that. And if they seize that opportunity, they will then be able to protect these institutions.
I call Jonathan Buckley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The hypocrisy of this urgent oral court rulings from numerous parties, the hypocrisy of the words opposite from members of a political party that has convictions that would make Al Capone blush. Mr Speaker, would the First Minister agree with me that there is a way in which this can be resolved, and that is by the European Union engaging constructively to ensure that they remove the east-west barriers that they helped create, which is damaging to the Northern Ireland economy and its people?
Mr Speaker, the member is absolutely right, and I have met with Maros Sefcovic. I was able to speak to him directly. I reassured him that we very much respect the integrity of the European single market whenever it comes to goods. But I also made it abundantly clear that the European Union had to respect Northern Ireland's place within the internal market of the United Kingdom and the free flow of goods on an east-west basis. So let's see what the European Union propose. I have detected the change in tone. We need to assess that now by way of its proposals, and then there will be a period of negotiations with the UK Government. I hope it's successful.
Paul Matthew O'Toole.
Mr Speaker, First Minister, you talk repeatedly about the damage to east-west links. Many people have noticed that north-south links have also been damaged. The end of the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive, threats to data moving between the two jurisdictions, the need for healthcare workers helping sick children get to hospital in Dublin, requiring joint registration now on both sides of the border, countless disruptions to north-south. Given all of those disruptions to north-south, First Minister, will you also be boycotting meetings with British ministers too?
Well, no, absolutely. I'll not be boycotting meetings on an east-west dimension. Well, what the member failed to say in all of the points that he has made, and I would love to see what he said backed up with evidence. I have evidence about the notice around discontinuation from the pharmaceutical companies in Great Britain, of which we receive over 90% of our medical supplies, not being able to provide medication to the people of Northern Ireland. So if the member opposite is content for not to have medication for all of the illnesses that all of our people share, shame on him if that's the position that he has.
Members, behave yourselves. Just please be seated. Resume your seat. I want this debate to continue to be dealt with in a manner which respects the subject matter, the right of members to ask a question, their obligation to listen for an answer, and a responsible answer from the Minister in question. So I want to try this again without any further interruptions. We've had enough interruptions so far, so I'll leave it up to the Minister now who's on his feet. Call Meg Nesbitt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The First Minister made reference to commitments under New Decade, New Approach. On that basis, does he think that this court ruling would make a Bill of Rights more or less desirable?
Well, Mr Speaker, there's been an ad hoc committee established to look at the issue of Bill of Rights. I look forward to reading its deliberations in due course.
I call Diane Dodds.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, First Minister, for your answers so far. The EU and the Dublin Government have been somewhat tin-eared so far in its response to Unionists' concerns about the protocol. Do you believe that there is a will to rectify the harms of the protocol, and do you acknowledge that this just is not a matter of trade, but also a matter of our Constitution and our rights under the Act of Union?
Mr Speaker, the member very ably points to the two issues. One is about the movement of goods, and the other is about respecting the constitutional arrangements of the United Kingdom. And they are the issues that we require a resolution to in respect of that. The member is right in terms of our concerns whenever it comes to the extent to which the Southern Government is listening or not listening. They didn't listen at the time. Indeed, the then government went on a parade around Europe with bombed border posts from the 1970s in order to extract leverage about protecting the peace process, using the very much implied threat of violence to back up their political campaign to deliver the protocol. And then to have the Foreign Affairs Minister indicate that the issue that has come to light recently, the European Court of Justice and its jurisdiction, is a new issue, really does leave us asking ourselves, can he not see and does he not listen to what has happened and what we have said, what was contained in the United Kingdom's command paper, and what also was contained within the leader of this party's speech whenever he outlined the issues that need to be addressed. I hope they start to listen, because I want to have good relations, not just on this island, but across these islands. But that requires everybody to take on board the issues that are being brought to the table, and the Southern Government need to pay attention to that.
Call Christopher Stalford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, those who argued and passed a motion calling for the rigorous implementation of the protocol have now been exposed as foolish, because even their masters in Brussels have indicated a preparedness to consider alterations and changes. Time will tell whether or not those changes go far enough, but does my colleague, the First Minister, agree that those who passed that motion demanding rigorous implementation were stupid so to do?
Well, Mr. Speaker, not only was that motion passed, there were numerous motions that were being brought to this Assembly around the implementation of the protocol, and indeed a delegation at a time of a global pandemic and restrictions that were in place went on a parade to Dublin to make the case for the rigorous implementation of the protocol. So parties in this chamber have to bear responsibility for the actions that they took over the past period of time. And when they take that responsibility, let them then recognise we are very much wanting to have a resolution. And in seeking a resolution, you first have to accept whenever you got it wrong. The parties in this chamber that called for the rigorous implementation of the protocol not only got it wrong, they got it badly wrong.
I call Justin McNulty.
The only party in this chamber who campaigned for Brexit was the DUP. Sorry, Jim.
The real leader. At least the member brought a bit of levity there to the debate. But go ahead. I'll let you off on that one. Go ahead, Justin.
At this time of uncertainty, strife and struggle for so many people, can the First Minister outline what he hopes to achieve by non-attendance at the North-South Ministerial Council meetings? And does he understand and recognise that the politics of no and never have not served your party well in the past and will not do so now?
Well, Mr. Speaker, if I can just remind the member, and we go back to the debate around Brexit, it wasn't the Democratic Unionist Party that delivered Brexit. It was the people of the United Kingdom whose vote was exactly the same as my vote. We all only had one vote each, so no party delivered Brexit. It was a decision of the people of the United Kingdom. Then, in its implementation, wrongly, the United Kingdom government did not treat us all equally. I hope that they now will put that right in the period of time ahead, and let us all get to that place where this institution can deliver for all of our people, that we can work together, that we can act in good faith, and we can continue to provide what our community demands of us, and that is a stable, functioning government delivering for all its people.
Well, Steve Egan.
I thank the First Minister for his response so far. First Minister, could you outline what sanctions there's ever been against any minister to the ministerial codes, or indeed has there been any penalties that have been applied at any stage to any minister for breaching the ministerial code?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we never want to get to the point where sanctions need to be applied. What we want to do is get to a place where the politics works, and that we can avoid those type of actions. Now, there has been in times where ministers have been taken to court. They've been found to be in breach of the ministerial code. I can think of a number of issues. I also can go back to even this summer, when there were 2 ministers who judicially reviewed an operational decision of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, despite that issue being raised by fellow executive colleagues, subject to the ministerial code, that decision should have been taken by the executive. Those ministers decided to proceed with their judicial review actions. I leave it at that, Mr. Speaker, because there is an ongoing case in respect of that decision.
Call Trevor Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Listening to some in the chamber, it's do as we say, not as we do, yes. In terms of the executive and in terms of the executive business. However, in the media, First Minister, we're hearing of reports of a scheduled meeting for North-South. What actually constitutes such meetings?
Well, can I thank the member for that question, because it's a very important question, because some ministers have spoken about there being scheduled meetings to take place this week. There are no such scheduled meetings to take place. There is only a scheduled meeting at the point in which attendance and its agenda is agreed by the Executive Office. At that point, when a meeting has had its agenda and attendance agreed, then the Executive Office will notify fellow executive colleagues that that meeting is taking place, and we will also notify you, Mr. Speaker, of such a meeting taking place. Far from me to draw the Speaker into this debate, but he can confirm or otherwise if he has received notification of there being a scheduled meeting. So there are no scheduled meetings that have been sanctioned by way of the agenda or attendance taking place this week. Can I just say, Mr. Speaker, in response to that, I have signed off in line with the statement that was made by the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, that when it came to the issues around health, that would be an area which should be able to continue. And that meeting I have cleared to take place this week. I have also added to that, given that the Peace Plus programme has within it a particular theme that relates to health and funding associated with that, subject to the Deputy First Minister approving that through the urgent procedure, that meeting should take place, and it should then approve the Peace Plus funding in respect of the urgent procedure that the Department of Finance Minister has requested.
They call Pat Cadney.
Thank you. First Minister, you're embarrassed by your antics over the whole Brexit issue, simply because you're the party that owned it. You tripped in and out of number 10 with Boris Johnson. Take ownership of it and get on with what you agreed and what you liked at the time.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whenever it comes to the issue of Brexit, I repeat what I said earlier. This was a decision that was taken on a UK-wide basis, and the people of Northern Ireland were able to exercise their vote. I shouldn't have to go back to the member and indicate London, for example, had a much higher level of opposition to Brexit, but because it's part of the United Kingdom, just like Northern Ireland, therefore it is subjected to the outcome of that decision. What I need to see, what we all want to see, is the arrangements working here in Northern Ireland that respects East-West and North-South. I think they are important, and I respect the member opposite, who has nationalist ambitions for the reunification of Ireland, a perfectly legitimate political aspiration to have. But he must respect my ambition for Northern Ireland to remain an integral part of the United Kingdom, unless there is the consent of the people of Northern Ireland to change that. The protocol makes a change to that constitutional arrangement, and it does so without having the consent of a single unionist.
There are no further members indicating to question the Minister, so on that basis then that concludes this item of business. Could members please take a raise again for a moment or two?